Thank you, everyone. First off, hi, everyone. My name's Tariq. I've been doing improv IT here, but my day job is a senior privacy engineering consultant at Kalles Group. And today, we're going to talk about the Fediverse and decentralized web services. We'll go a little bit in terms of how we got here, some of the legal challenges, what happens when you try to run one of these servers, speaking from experience, and design considerations. But first, a word from our sponsor, mainly the reason that I'm here. I work for a small consulting firm called Kalles Group. We're a firm that aims at securing the future for everyone, whether you're a growing or large tech company or small restaurants aiming to protect their customers' credit card data. We focus on a strategic and holistic approach that tailors to whatever organization you're working in, whether you need an entire new strategy or specific tactical support. Now that I've got that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about web history. In the beginning, there was GeoCities. And the entire internet looked like this, except a lot more blink tags. It was a wonderful information superhighway where you could find a piece of information at your finger, just typing something at your fingers. But the bigger point is that in the 80s and 90s, the internet was primarily about finding information and finding things. If you were to set up your own web service, it took a lot of know-how. You needed to know how to manage your own LAMP stack. You needed to deal with your firewall permissions. You need to figure out how to register a domain name and all these details. And for the public, there was way less knowledge about technology and the risks that come with it. And that lack of knowledge also extended to legislators and regulators, where there was just simply not a lot of ideas about what risks technology can bring. Fast forward to today, most of the reason you're interacting with the internet as a whole is to interact with other people. In other words, primarily a social-based medium. And with the advent and spread of technology, people have started becoming at least a little bit aware, if not a bit knowledgeable, about some of the security and privacy risks. And that has also expanded to regulators and legislators who are thinking about privacy, trust and safety, misinformation, disinformation, and all these challenges. And then for those of you who've been tuning into the social media changes of the last year, we started seeing this thing pop up called Federation. And it's been around for a couple of years, but it's gathered a little bit more of interest in the last year or so. Your traditional websites, you log into Facebook to post stuff or interact with friends. You grab your slides from Google Drive. Those are centralized services that are run by one organization or group. Decentralized services, on the other hand, is maybe you're taking someone else's code but running it yourself. Now, this is different from enterprise on-prem, where you say you're running your own instance of someone else's code in an isolated environment. In this case, you're running your own code, but you're interacting with different other groups that are also running that. So an example in theory is like your crypto, Web3, decentralized idea, but also social media like Mastodon and Blue Sky, which is kind of where I'm focusing today. And the thing that's been interesting about this change is as it's become so much easier to deploy technology, we have an increasing level of challenge of all of the non-technical challenges that come with running these. Like I could probably spin up a Mastodon server in the 10 or 15 minutes I have, but there's a whole long tail of problems that aren't necessarily on the face value. The first part, there's a whole bunch of legal challenges that come up. One of the big ones being privacy regulation, which is part of the reason a lot of us have our current jobs. If I'm running my own server, I now have to think about privacy rights. I have to think about cookie consents. I have to think about data portability, data deletion, compliance requirements, cookie banners, all those things that don't really come up with a Docker script. There's also challenges with content moderation. And this is a really rapidly evolving area of law right now. And there's been all talk of changing the rules of what can be done with content moderation. And larger platforms have a lot of resources dedicated to this, much more than one or two people. And then there's copyright. People are going to use the internet to upload content that they don't have the right to share. And you could get in trouble for that if you don't know how to protect yourself. And so if you're just running your own server, these challenges get bigger and more complex. Starting with the technical challenges, it's become easier to set up servers and instances, But you still have challenges like keeping your server up and running, dealing with security patches, dealing with privacy protections, dealing with user complaints. There's also financial challenges. I, for example, run my own Mastodon server, and if I can't pay the bills one day, the server goes down. That's not a problem that you generally have with bigger platforms. On the other side, when bigger platforms come into the picture, it can really affect the type of service and the type of interactions that you have on this platform. For example, Threads announcing that they were going to support the Mastodon protocol put a lot of ripple effects into the broader Mastodon community of how that would affect the way that people interact. And then there's legal challenges. I don't have an organization that runs my own Mastodon server, it's just me. And so there is a chance I might be exposing myself to individual liability, not just with the things I mentioned before, but there's things like CSAM, or in the absolute nightmare black swan case, I get a national security letter. That's millions of dollars of legal resources that most big organizations pay, but I maybe put $10 a month to this. And then there's policy considerations. Now, we've had internet communities for a long time, and like web forums and Discord servers and whatnot, but there's an additional challenge here of how is your community interacting with all the communities around. Like if someone reports a user on your instance from another one, how are you going to deal with them? Because maybe they were following your rules, but they weren't following the rules of someone they were interacting with. And there's a lack of shared knowledge on how to deal with these challenges. And so what I want everyone to take away from this is that if we're going to have decentralized services, we need to have an approach that considers the variable level of resources that each individual has. And so I think there's three broad considerations that we should think about as we build out decentralized services. First is how do we bring some of those advantages of centralized services and centralized infrastructure to decentralized parties? One example of this is, I believe, AT-Proto, which is the project backing Blue Sky, has been exploring having moderation policies that you can share between Blue Sky instances. Mastodon has a boilerplate terms of service that you can put on your website. So thinking about technical and non-technical solutions that you can provide that reduce the burden of people who want to just run their own communities. The other challenge to consider is technical consistency. There is the long tail problem of making sure that these servers get updated, making sure that everything is patched quickly, because sometimes people will forget, or people you don't have had the experience to set it up, but to actually update it was a different challenge altogether. And then there's user experience consistency, making sure that I am able to have those critical user journeys and critical user stories in a way that's relatively uniform between the communities I go through. Now, the thing to consider as we go through this entire picture is, I think, a broader principle that we should take in. And that principle is that when we build, if we're going to have a service, if we're going to have a future that has decentralized services, we have to consider a much wider range of resources and experiences. You have to figure out how are you going to build services that work for the hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue and the person who this is just their side project. And so as you build up these new designs, think about how you can build for the big fish and the little ones too. Thank you.